We now have Matt, who is going to dive into a topic I'm particularly interested in, but I'll certainly let him, talk about it.
Yeah, so basically, I guess two previous speakers has basically set the stage for the solution that I'm going to present to all the problems that you've pointed out. So basically, I was working on a project last year that was creating a personalized privacy assistant, and this is a way that you can reduce the cognitive load that James was also talking about in the first session. So what I want you to take away from this talk, and why I want you to listen to the rest of it, is that I want you to know that there's a challenge when it comes to implementing consent. This is something that's very stressed in the GDPR. I want to try to convince you that MyData is particularly complex when it comes to handling consents. And I want to tell you that these personalized privacy systems might actually be the solutions to this. So just briefly who I am. I think what's important here is that I'm actually from an academic background. So I've tried to change my presentation a bit. So it's not the same as if I was talking to the academic community. I'm currently at the Alexander Institute in Denmark, where I'm working as a security architect. But the research I'm going to be talking about is something I did at Carnegie Mellon last year. So just to scope the whole thing, I want to show you how MyData requests might look. So here you've got a user and a MyData operator. You've got a number of data sources here. Some of them, with the blue stuff on top, are also apps. This MyData operator needs to know that each of these things exist if they're to communicate in some way. And this app down here might actually request data from this source up here and this source. We might install another app. This requests data from 3 sources. We install another app, 3 sources as well. And what I'm trying to show you here is that all of a sudden we've got quite a lot of arrows in this diagram here. And each of these arrows actually translate to a consent in MyData. So it all points back to the user. This is cognitive load on the user. Just to give you some numbers, if you've got 30 apps with 5 permission each, you actually have 150 permissions that you need to control. I think that's key to understand, because a lot of the things that I've heard presented here are taking small examples and talking about how you can do consents in those kind of scenarios. But we need to be able to scale this, and setting this up for 2 applications is not the same as 30 applications. I think it's important to stress that privacy is not the main concern. And as we had in the first session, we had Pokemon Go, and when you want to hunt Pokemon Go, you just want to hunt Pokemon. You don't want to start what are the privacy settings for this app? No, you just want to get going. So we need to figure out a way to bring privacy up as primary interaction with the user. So how do we actually handle active consent? I think this is, to me, one of the big questions in the GDPR. Do we do it as they used to do in Android? You got this all or nothing thing. You actually get the choice not to accept this, but then you don't get the app. There's also the possibility to do it as iOS has been doing for a few versions, and Android has now adopted as well, where you got the first time a permission is requested and accessed, you have to confirm whether or not you want to allow this. This also usually comes with a permission manager where you can revise your settings. What I want to stress from this picture is that it's still rather complex. This is just location services from a phone, an actual phone. And as you can see, you can actually scroll down, and there's going to be even more stuff to make up your mind about. Because of this, we introduced a personalized privacy system. So what we want to do is we want to minimize the interaction that we need to have with the user. We don't want to ask the user 150 questions. We want to kind of turn it around and try to use user profiling to help the user rather than attack. And I put attack in quotes because somebody might disagree with me that targeted advertisement is an attack, but you could definitely view it that way. We also want to configure privacy as a dialogue and not just a one-off thing that you need to do. This needs to be a continuous thing that you have with the user. This was, as I said, part of a research project. This is the website for this project, and it's still ongoing. And I'm going to be talking a bit more about the study that we did. So when we want to create one of these assistants, there's basically 3 steps. We need to collect data and create profiles, which is done using machine learning, a method called clustering. I'm not going to get into details of that at all. You can read the paper if you want to. Then we need to assign the user to one of these profiles. And then we want to make recommendations to like privacy settings changes based on which profile the user falls in, and apps that are actually on the user's phone. So we created a prototype of this, and we did a study on this. And this is the paper, and there's going to be a link in the end of the presentation as well. So we implemented this on Android 5. It also worked on 4. So basically before they introduced the new permission model in Android. And just as minor details, we had a control group and we had a treatment group. It was an academic study. I want to point out that data collection in this setting is actually quite challenging, and it goes back to what Sarah was talking about earlier, is that people do stay to be more restrictive than they actually act. This has the consequence that we can't really just like do a survey, ask people about questions, and use that information to do profiling, because that would end up giving us way too restrictive profiles, and our like idea wouldn't work. So basically, we need to build these profiles in a real-world setting, and it's all about contextualization. And this is actually quite a hard problem, especially in MyData as well. So just to give you an idea of how we did the data collection here, from a previous study that some of my colleagues did, they found out that these privacy nudges, where you kind of tell the user once a day about something that might not expect. This is like using your location data 1,222 times in the past week. And this would give the user, we did this for a week, as I said, and you would have like a permission manager where you would have a bit more information about how this has been accessed than the normal one. Based on this, we created 7 profiles. And just to give you a quick idea of how effective they were, we found that if we just averaged over all the users and just created one profile and basically didn't do profiling at all, we had like a 74% accuracy on like how happy people were with this. Whereas we got like a 90% prediction rate if we had these 7 clusters based on the test set. So the next step is to assign the user to a profile. So basically we create a decision tree based on what the user actually has installed. Then we ask 2 to 5 privacy related questions that are based on the user's actual phone and the stuff installed. So we ask, are you okay with these travel and local apps as it's in your location? We show some apps. And we also have a frequency. When the user has answered 2 to 5 of these questions and we're confident enough, we place them in a profile. And after that, we recommend the user to deny a lot of permissions based on the profile that they are not in. We also gave the user the possibility to see why we would recommend this particular setting to be denied. But we also wanted to allow the user to be able to change it like back. If, for example, like if you want Facebook to actually access your location, well, you might not want to deny it. So we found that during our study, which we ran with 72 participants, they accepted 78.8% of the recommendations, which also shows us that they actually interacted with the use that we showed them. So after the recommendations, we showed the same nudges as we did during the data collection, which was basically a way to figure out whether or not they were actually happy about what they ended up with after the recommendations. What we found in both conditions, the control and the one where they saw the assistant, was that they restricted more settings after seeing the assistant, but that the users with the assistants actually that they converged towards like a stable set of privacy settings faster than the control group. So this was a success for the study. We also found that the users were actually quite comfortable with interacting with the users. We asked a lot of questions about that.
Who were the users?
The users were like, as I said, we recruited Android users, but to access this permission system, you basically have to have a rooted phone, because obviously, like any app can't go in and change the permission settings. That would kind of it's against the whole idea. So we had to root the phones, and we recruited on Reddit and Facebook and different other sources So if you're going to read the paper, you can see more about this. But what I basically want to say is that this is a more restricted population than the general population, but that doesn't invalidate the method of clustering. We would just reach different clusters, but it's of course really important to build the profiles on the same population that are going to use the app. So if we were going to release this to the general population, we would have to gather new data. I want to talk quickly about how this relates to MyData. So basically what we've got here is that in the study we had 6 permissions. That's a very low number, and it's still really, really complex. If you couple these permissions with a purpose, which is part of the DPR as well, well, one permission, for example, location, might actually be 4 different locations, not different permissions based on what this location is going to be used for. So already there we've got like a factor 4, that's just a random number. It's probably even higher. Adding to that in MyData you basically have unlimited, and I can't come up with a fixed number of the data sources you might actually want to access from a MyData application. It could be your like electricity consumption, your travel data, your bank data, your shopping data. It's basically unlimited how much data you could ask for in these apps. So I put a question mark behind the point of having more apps. That's just how I see the future. So basically what this means that this is more complex than the mobile study that we just did. So that just stresses that something like assisting the user is even more important in MyData than it is in the mobile domain. So quickly on the future of how I and my colleagues last year actually see this this thing going forward. Well, we want to, right now it's like a one-off. We ran the study for like 2 weeks. So we went in, showed this recommendation, this assignment dialogue, and then it was done. So we want this to be a continuous dialogue, as I said before. We also want to do more dynamic profile placement. For example, your privacy preferences are not static, it's influenced by the people you're around. So you might actually move from one profile to another. We want to be able to handle this. We also want to, there's some really interesting research being done at Carnegie Mellon at the moment, which is talking about expected and unexpected practices. If you have Google Maps, you open this application, you expect it to place you on a map with your location, so it makes sense that it accesses your location to place you on a map. If it does the same thing for doing advertisements, you might actually want to know about it, but it might not be as important to tell you so that it's placing you on a map with your location. In the very, very far out future, we also see this as a pervasive assistant that you can like bring from mobile to MyData, IoT, and web, and it can help you across all the domains. So this is the research. It was presented at Symposium on Usable Privacy and Security, which is one of the main conferences of usable privacy and security. It's called Follow My Recommendations, a personalized privacy system for mobile app permissions. And we actually won the IAPP's Privacy Award at this conference because they thought it was the most applicable research presented at the conference. I want to leave you with this last point here, is that we're actually quite interested in trying to build these assistant, and that's not at Carnegie Mellon, that's at the Alexander Institute where I'm currently based. So we want to apply this to a real problem. So we're actually looking for someone who's like interested in working with us on this. But we need data to build these profiles, that's why we need partners. The benefit of this would be you as partners would get insights to a new technology that I think, and some of my colleagues in the US think will be taking off at some point. And you may actually get some implementation advice on how to do this. And if you're interested in this, please do contact me after the presentation. I'm on LinkedIn, email, whatever, I've got cards, so just find me down in the reception area. But please do contact me, even though if you just want to hear more about this stuff, because this was a very, very brief description of what it actually is. Thanks.